When you look at the people who have done the extraordinary, built empires, disrupted industries, transformed lives, what you'll find isn't just intelligence or strategy, it's belief. A deep-rooted reason that drives them forward. Even when the odds scream retreat, they didn't begin with a plan. Stability. They began with a belief that they could and should change something. That belief lived in their mind long before the world caught up. Most people start with what they want. They say, I want to be rich. I want to be successful. But the problem with starting with what is that, it lacks the emotional engine. It doesn't give your mind something meaningful to fight for. When obstacles come, and they always do, what will crumble? Only a strong why can stand through the resistance. The mind doesn't commit fully until it understands why the mission matters. Your mind is a battlefield long before the world becomes one. Every doubt, every hesitation, every fear, those are internal wars. And if you haven't built a compelling reason to keep going, you'll retreat. Every great achievement was once invisible. It lived only in someone's head. And it stayed there until the belief became so strong, the mind had no choice but to chase it. The moment you clarify why you want something, your brain begins working in your favor. Not just emotionally, but neurologically. The reticular activating system, the part of the brain that filters your attention, starts highlighting things that support your mission. It shows you the path where you used to see walls. But the key is, it only activates once there's clarity. The mind cannot pursue what the heart hasn't committed to. Purpose gives chaos a shape. Without it, you drift. You start chasing other people's definitions of success. You scroll through lives that look shiny but feel empty. You follow trends that lead you nowhere. But when you define why something matters to you, personally, deeply, then you stop reacting and start directing. You become intentional. The mind needs that direction or it will wander endlessly. Even the most talented people struggle when they lose their why. Athletes burn out, entrepreneurs give up, artists go silent. Not because they lost their skill, but because they lost their center. Success becomes mechanical, disconnected from meaning. The mind is powerful, yes, but only when it's anchored to purpose. Otherwise, it just loops. Thinking, overthinking, doubting, hesitating. Starting with why doesn't mean having all the answers. It means having a reason strong enough to withstand not knowing. It means saying, I don't have the path, but I have the pull. But I have the pull. That pull is what wakes you up when you fail. It's what gets you back in the room when you've been rejected. It's what keeps your mind moving when fear tells it to freeze. Without that, talent stalls, discipline fades, strategy dies. The truth is, the mind follows emotion more than logic. You can know something makes sense and still not do it. But if something feels right, if your purpose resonates on a gut level, then your mind obeys. It becomes creative. It becomes resilient. It becomes focused. Not because you forced it, but because you gave it something it could believe in. Before anyone changes their life, they have to change their mind. Not in the motivational poster sense. In the neurological, deeply personal sense. Because most people aren't held back by lack of skill or opportunity. Want those too, right too. They're held back by the invisible sentences they've repeated to themselves for years. I'm not smart enough. I've never been good with money. People like me don't succeed. These aren't facts. They're beliefs. And beliefs are choices we've mistaken for truths. Limiting beliefs are rarely loud. They whisper. They sound like logic. They wear the mask of caution, humility, or realism. But what they really do is build a cage around your potential. The moment your mind accepts a belief as identity, it will defend it, even if it hurts you. You won't just fear failure. You'll unconsciously prove yourself right. You'll self-sabotage, procrastinate, or pull back just before the breakthrough. Not because you're weak, but because your mind is loyal to the story you've told it. These stories usually weren't written by us. They were planted. They were planted. Incarnate. Maybe by a parent who meant well, but didn't believe in dreaming big. A teacher who dismissed you. A moment of failure that left a scar. Over time, these moments become patterns, and those patterns become narratives. And your brain, wired for efficiency, keeps repeating them until they feel like identity. But just because something is familiar doesn't mean it's true. Rewiring beliefs starts with awareness. You have to catch the script. The moment you say, I've always been this way, or that's just not who I am, you're probably bumping into a belief, not a fact. And once you see the belief, you challenge it. Ask where it came from. Ask if it serves you. Ask what would happen if the opposite were true. Beliefs can't survive scrutiny. When you expose them, they lose power. The brain is plastic. It physically changes with experience and thought. So when you replace an old belief with a new one, you're not just a thinking positive. You're reconditioning the neural pathways that control your behavior. It's not overnight. It's a practice, repetition, evidence, affirmation matched with action. Over time, the new belief becomes default, and your behavior starts reflecting that upgrade without forcing it. But there's a catch. Your environment matters. You can't rewire your beliefs if you're surrounded by people who constantly reinforce the old ones. Your mind is porous. It absorbs the language, attitudes, and energy of those around you. If you want to think differently, sometimes you have to stand alone. Or at least stand outside the noise long enough to hear your own thoughts clearly. One of the most powerful shifts you can make is from I can't to I haven't yet. That small adjustment creates space. It tells your brain this isn't permanent. It's just present. And when the brain sees something as temporary, it gets curious again. It looks for a solution. It starts learning instead of shutting down. That mindset alone can turn limitation into growth without changing anything but the belief behind it. Limiting beliefs don't vanish because you read a quote or say an affirmation. They fade because you prove them wrong. One small action at a time. Every time you do something your old self would have avoided. Speaking up, showing up, trying again, you chip away at the lie. The brain sees the contradiction and eventually it adapts. Not because it was easy, but because you decided your truth was more powerful than your past. Your brain doesn't speak in words. It speaks in images, emotion, and patterns. That's why visualization isn't wishful thinking. It's instruction. When you visualize something with clarity and emotion, your brain begins rehearsing success. It doesn't know the difference between imagined experience and real experience. It simply responds to the input. And the clearer that input, the stronger the neurological response. But most people don't visualize with precision. They imagine vague ideas, being rich, being happy, being successful. Those images are soft, blurry, and non-specific. The brain can't build a roadmap with that. Clarity is what creates traction. What does success look like at 7 o'clock a.m. on a Tuesday? What does your office smell like? What does your bank account say? Who are you with? What do you feel when you walk into the room? That level of detail gives the brain something it can replicate. Visualization is mental conditioning. Top athletes rehearse their performance in their minds before they ever step on the field. They walk through the shot, the sprint, the moment, over and over. Not because they're obsessed, but because they understand how the brain works. Neural pathways strengthen with repetition. The same applies to business, creativity, leadership, any domain where execution matters. If your mind has already done it, your body follows more naturally. It's not just about outcomes, though it's about the process. Visualizing yourself doing the hard, boring, disciplined work trains your mind to associate effort with identity. Most people only imagine the finish line, but the champions imagine the reps, the rejections, the early mornings, the uncomfortable conversations. They rehearse adversity, so when it comes, their mind says, I've been here before. Emotion is the amplifier. A visual with no emotion is flat. When you attach feeling to the image, pride, freedom, joy, peace, your brain lights up in new ways. That emotional charge tells the mind, this matters. And the mind, always seeking efficiency, begins filtering your world through that lens. You notice opportunities, make faster decisions, and build momentum, because your subconscious is now aligned with your conscious intent. Precision in visualization is also about honesty. Well, you don't just imagine the good, imagine the resistance, the doubt, the fatigue, the fear, and then imagine yourself moving through it, overcoming it. That creates mental resilience. Teaches your brain that fear isn't a stop sign, it's a signal. This kind of visualization is preparation, not fantasy. It makes you calmer in crisis because your nervous system has practiced courage before it's needed. The more often you visualize with precision, the more congruent you become. Your thoughts, actions, and identity start to align. There's no internal conflict between what you want and how you act. You stop self-sabotaging because your inner world and your outer world begin matching. That congruence is powerful. It builds confidence. Not because you're faking it, but because you've already lived it. In your mind. Thousands of times. You don't have to visualize for hours. Just consistently and clearly. Before a presentation. Before a decision. Before a challenge. 5 minutes of precisely emotionally charged imagery can shift your entire state. It tells your brain, this is who I am. This is what I do. This is what happens next. Over time, the line between imagination and reality begins to blur, and your mind simply continues the story you've been telling it all along. You don't get what you want. You get what you believe you are. That's the quiet force of identity. It runs deeper than goals, louder than motivation, and more consistent than discipline. If your identity says you're average, you'll unconsciously act in ways that confirm it. If your identity says you're a leader, you'll find ways to rise, even in chaos. Success follows identity, not the other way around. Most people try to change their lives by changing their behavior. They force themselves to work harder, wake up earlier, think more positively. But if their identity still says, I'm not that kind of person, it won't stick. You can't outperform how you see yourself for long. Eventually, The identity you've accepted will pull you back to its level. You don't rise to your goals. You settle into your standards. Identity is shaped through repetition and evidence. It's not just what you tell yourself, it's what you prove to yourself over and over. Every time you follow through, even in a small way, you cast a vote for the person you believe you're becoming. Confidence doesn't come from compliments. It comes from alignment. It comes from alignment. When your actions match your vision of yourself, your brain starts rewriting the script. The danger is when you inherit identities you didn't choose. Maybe someone told you you're the quiet one, or you're not athletic, or you're bad with money. And without realizing it, you accepted that label and lived it out. But you're not born with a fixed self. You're born with potential. Identity is fluid and it can evolve, but only if you become intentional about who you're becoming. One powerful shift is to stop asking, what should I do? And start asking, who would I be if I already had the life I wanted? When you think from identity instead of circumstance, your behavior becomes consistent with the future, not the past. That version of you, the focused one, the resilient one, the bold one, already exists in your imagination. And if you act in alignment with that vision long enough, your brain begins to accept it as real. The brain doesn't care if a belief is true. It cares if it's consistent. It's consistent. So if you keep acting like someone who is disciplined, focused, creative, generous, eventually your identity catches up. It stops resisting, and it starts reinforcing. You no longer have to force yourself to behave. You simply behave in line with who you believe you are. That's when transformation becomes natural. Identity isn't ego, it's foundation. It's the anchor beneath the surface that determines whether you show up or shut down. And like any foundation, it can be rebuilt, but it takes deliberate effort. It means letting go of familiar roles, outdated labels, and the comfort of who you used to be. It means choosing a future version of yourself and stepping into that person with consistency, not perfection. The most powerful question you can ask is, who am I becoming? Not what do I want, not what am I lacking, but who, day by day, choice by choice, am I turning into? That question shifts your mindset from external achievement to internal evolution. And when identity leads, success becomes the byproduct. We live in a culture that celebrates hustle. It celebrates hustle. Grind harder, sleep less, push more. But effort without direction is just exhaustion. Focus is what gives effort its edge. It's not how much you do. It's how precisely you aim. Most people aren't failing because they're lazy. Lazy. They're failing because they're trying to do too much at once, chasing noise instead of signal. The brain wasn't designed for constant input. When you split your attention, you dilute your power. You start a project, get distracted, check your phone, shift to something else, and wonder why nothing moves forward. It's not a productivity issue, it's a focus issue. And when the mind is scattered, results are scattered. Clarity is leverage. Clarity is leverage. When you know exactly what matters, the unnecessary begins to fall away. Force says, do everything. Focus says, do the essential. It's the difference between trying to move a boulder with your hands versus using a lever. One drains you. The other multiplies your effort. High performers don't just work hard. They work with ruthless clarity. They know their priority. They protect their attention like it's currency, because they understand it's the most valuable asset they have. Focus is a skill, not a trait. It's something you train. And it starts by getting honest about distraction. Not just digital noise, but mental clutter. Thoughts that don't serve you. Commitments that don't align. People who drain your energy. Every yes you give to something unimportant is a no to something that could change your life. The mind needs boundaries to stay sharp. To focus is to simplify. To say, this is the target and I will hit it. Not because you're avoiding other options, but because you're honoring the one that matters most right now. Force tries to juggle 10 things and drops them all. Focus chooses one and masters it. That mastery builds confidence, and confidence fuels even deeper focus. There's a calmness that comes with focus. When you're fully engaged in what matters, noise fades. You stop comparing, overthinking, doubting. You move from scattered energy to strategic momentum. And the irony is, the more focused you become, the less force you need. Results start to compound not because you're working harder, but because every action is aligned. Most people try to overcome resistance with willpower. They push harder, burn out, then blame themselves for not being disciplined enough. But focus eliminates half the resistance by removing the friction of indecision. When your path is clear, your energy is clean. You're not wasting time choosing, you're spending it doing. That's why 1 hour of focused work can outperform 10 hours of distracted effort. True focus isn't rigid. It's committed. It doesn't mean you ignore everything forever. It means you choose what matters now and you go all in. And in that choice, you discover something powerful. You never needed more time, talent, or energy. You just needed to aim it all in one direction. Waiting to feel ready is one of the most subtle forms of procrastination. It disguises itself as preparation, perfectionism, or logic. But what it really is, at its core, is fear. Fear of failure. Fear of judgment. Fear of not being enough. And the mind, trying to protect you, says, oh, let's wait. Let's learn a little more. Let's make sure everything's perfect first. But that moment never comes, because readiness isn't a feeling, it's a decision. Action creates clarity, not the other way around. You don't figure it all out, and then move. You move, and the figuring out happens along the way. The truth is, most of what you need to learn can only be learned after you start. You can read the books, take the courses, listen to the experts, but until you put yourself in motion, it's theory. Experience teaches faster than planning ever could. Confidence doesn't come before action. It comes from action. People wait to feel confident before they speak, launch, apply, lead, but the confidence only shows up after they do the thing they were afraid of. It's built through proof. Small wins, evidence that you can handle discomfort. And the only way to get that proof is to move before your mind says it's safe. The brain craves certainty, and so it resists anything that feels ambiguous or risky. But growth lies in that exact space. The unknown is where transformation begins. When you act before you're ready, you teach your mind that discomfort isn't danger. It's development. That shift in interpretation is what separates those who evolve from those who stay stuck. Most people overestimate what could go wrong and underestimate what could go right. They rehearse failure in their minds like it's inevitable. But if you're going to imagine something, imagine possibility. Imagine momentum. Imagine what shifts in your life if you take one imperfect step today instead of waiting for the perfect conditions that will never exist. The mind adapts fastest when it has something real to respond to. Perfection is a moving target, and the longer you wait to begin, the more intimidating the starting line becomes. The mind starts building the moment into something massive, unreachable. But when you act early, before you feel qualified, before you feel certain, you shrink the fear down to size. You remind yourself that progress doesn't come from knowing. It comes from doing. Acting before you're ready doesn't mean being reckless. It means trusting that you'll figure it out as you go. As you go. It means showing up with what you have, not what you wish you had. And that courage, however small, builds internal momentum. One small leap turns into two. The mind starts to trust you again because you're leading it instead of letting it lead you in circles. Everyone who did something great started unsure. They didn't wait for permission or perfection. They moved. They learned. They adjusted. And in doing so, they built the very readiness they were waiting for. The act created the ability. The leap built the wings. Resilience isn't something you're born with. It's something you build. Like muscle, it grows through repetition, stress, and recovery. It's developed in the moments when quitting would be easier, when backing down feels justified, and when comfort is just one excuse away. And like any muscle, if you don't train it, it weakens. You can't just hope to be strong when life gets heavy. You have to practice strength before the weight arrives. The mistake most people make is thinking resilience is about never breaking. It's not. It's about how quickly you recover when you do. Everyone gets knocked down. Everyone doubts. Everyone hits moments where nothing makes sense. Resilience is the decision to rise, again and again, even when motivation is gone and clarity is missing. It's not emotional perfection. It's emotional stamina. Every setback is an invitation. You can frame it as failure, or you can frame it as feedback. One mindset shuts you down. The other opens you up. Resilient people aren't stronger because life is easier for them. They're stronger because they've trained their minds to interpret struggle as part of the process, not a signal to stop. That interpretation is everything. The brain responds not to the event, but to the meaning you attach to it. Small stress builds capacity. You don't start with the hardest weights in the gym. You build up gradually. The same is true for resilience. Every time you do something hard, have the conversation, face the fear, show up anyway. You increase your threshold. The mind learns that discomfort won't destroy you. And over time, what used to feel overwhelming becomes part of your normal. Recovery is part of training. You don't grow stronger by grinding non-stop. You grow stronger by balancing stress with rest. Resilience doesn't mean ignoring your limits. It means understanding them, respecting them, and expanding them with intention. The strongest people aren't the ones who never break. Just for that. They're the ones who know when to breathe, reset, and go again. You build resilience when you show up for yourself in quiet moments, when no one's watching. When it's easier to scroll, delay, or numb out, but you choose growth instead. That choice, small, unseen, uncelebrated, is what compounds. You don't become unshakable through big gestures. You become unshakable through daily decisions that say, I keep going. The stories you tell yourself during adversity matter. If your internal dialogue says, this always happens to me, or I can't handle this, your resilience shrinks. But if you shift that story to, this is hard, but I've done hard things before, you give your brain a reason to fight. Resilience isn't just emotional, it's linguistic. The words you use during pressure moments either empower you or exhaust you. Ultimately, resilience is a relationship with discomfort. Most people run from it. Resilient people walk toward it, not because they enjoy pain, but because they understand it's part of the process. They've trained their minds to see challenge not as a threat, but as a test of readiness. This test of readiness. And with every test passed, they build an identity that says, I can handle more goals are useful, but they're not enough. They give you a destination, but they don't tell you why you're going there. That's where purpose comes in. Purpose comes in. Purpose isn't a finish line, it's a direction, a compass. It doesn't expire when you reach a number, check a box, or hit a milestone. It keeps pulling you forward because it's rooted in something deeper than achievement. A goal says, I want to make $1 million. Purpose says, I want to create freedom for my family. One is measurable. The other is meaningful. The danger in chasing goals without purpose is that you can succeed and still feel empty. You can climb the ladder only to realize it was leaning against the wrong wall. Purpose prevents that. It gives your ambition context. When you lead with goals, you often sacrifice alignment for speed. You push harder, take shortcuts, and burn out trying to hit targets that may not even matter anymore. But when purpose is your guide, decisions become simpler. You stop chasing what looks good and start choosing what feels right. You start filtering opportunities through a lens of meaning, not just metrics. Purpose makes you resilient. When a goal gets delayed, denied, or derailed, people who are only goal-focused tend to give up. But people rooted in purpose adapt. They find new paths, new strategies, new timelines, because the mission didn't die, just the method. Just the method. Purpose gives your mind something to stay loyal to when circumstances shift. It keeps the fire lit even when the plan changes. Clarity of purpose also protects you from comparison. When you don't know why you're doing something, it's easy to get pulled into someone else's race. You start measuring your progress against their highlight reel. But when you're connected to purpose, you don't need validation. You're not chasing applause. You're honoring something personal. That internal compass makes you harder to shake. Goals can be motivating, but they're external. They depend on outcomes you can't always control. Purpose, on the other hand, is internal. It's available every day, whether you're winning or losing, ahead or behind. It creates consistency. You don't have to wait for progress to feel fulfilled. You feel fulfilled because you're aligned with something that matters to you. When your actions serve your purpose, discipline becomes easy. You don't need to force yourself through every task because you're not just checking boxes. You're building something that reflects your values. Purpose adds emotional weight to your choices. It makes saying no to distractions easier and saying yes to the hard stuff more meaningful. It pulls you forward instead of pushing you from behind. Purpose isn't always loud or grand. It doesn't have to be a world-changing mission. Sometimes it's as simple as creating stability, being a role model, telling the truth, or building something beautiful. The key is that it's yours. When you define that clearly, your mind stops wandering. It locks in, not because of pressure, but because of alignment.